Well, howdy, everybody. Welcome to the new Terrible Tendies Fantasy Football League season. Looks like we are about 1 week behind, but this is going to be our new format for the weekly recaps. You're going to be going on a little trip here today with Joe Kamish. Going to be doing some errands today. Going to be driving around, delivering some different things, picking up some different things. And while we do that, we're going to talk about a little Terrible Tendies Fantasy Football and get a little recap action going on today. How's that sound with all you? This should be fun. I'll be cutting in and out, so let's have some fun with it. All right, guys, we're going to start off week 2 recaps here. We're going to be talking about No Punt Intended and Jesus Tits MD. No punt intended, 92.5 points falling to Jesus Tits MD, who got their first win of the season, 113.4 points. Now, we're going to start off talking about every good team, because every good team has to have a great quarterback, and they need to have a great tight end. Jesus Tits MD has a great quarterback in Derek Carr. I think he's going to have an amazing year this year. He had 23 points on almost 300 yards passing, and 3 touchdowns. And, of course, he was on his tight end side. You definitely have Greg Olsen there. Greg Olsen, 5 catches, 122 yards, and a touchdown for 21.9 points. So it's going to be really cool to see kind of how that all works out, because those are a couple of great quarterback and a great tight end there for him. Now, we can't also dismiss the second tight end that Jesus Tits MD has sitting on his bench right now. With Gronk out, Bennett has just been amazing. He had 20 points on 5 catches, 114 yards, and of course he got in for a score. May need to consider if Gronkowski goes down again, depending on the matchup. Andy Dalton, I know the Red Rifle can put up some big numbers. He only had 18 points this week, and you still got the win despite that. But you may have to consider playing Bennett in there if Gronkowski, depending on how his recovery goes. We'll see if he's in. He wasn't in last night, but we'll see how that turns out. Now, for No Punt Intended, had a great game. Got to give it up to Matt Forte. He's certainly found the fountain of youth this year. He had 100 yards on 30 carries for 3 touchdowns, put up over 30 points. It was just amazing. And, of course, that Seahawks defense is going to be real stout this year. Had double-digit points for the second week in a row, so that's going to be huge for them. Now, Drew Brees and Andrew Luck this week definitely came back down to the ground. Brees came way back down to earth with only 12 points, and Luck just bottomed out, man. I mean, they did not have a good game against a game. They're only 4 points coming in for Luck, but I think we're going to see a decent chance at a rebound against San Diego this week for them. Mike Wallace has also been all boom. He was a big boom or bust player, but so far this season, just all boom. Amazing point totals, but again, on the bench. Got to get him out of that bench there. And of course, Giovanni Bernard, we all know how amazing he is. He had an amazing week this week, of course, just doing reception. So I'm going to pick up my coffee here real quick, and then we'll get on with some more recaps. Thank you. Have a good one. Got to get a little product placement, and we thank you, Starbucks. Now we got some caffeine rolling here. We're going to talk about our second matchup of the week. That's going to Ambitious But Rubbish versus 12 Monkeys. Ambitious But Rubbish put up 108 points, but I'm going to have some questions all season about Ambitious But Rubbish's consistency, because, man, this week was not a good week. You had 2 players put up over half of your points, and that was in Phillip Rivers and the Broncos defense and special team combined for half of all of their points at 54 points between the 2 of them. Just crazy. Nobody else really did much with one exception, and that was big old Ben Roethlisberger, the big old sack of potatoes himself. Big Ben tied a franchise record with Terry Bradshaw. If we go back to last year, he is now throwing 2 touchdowns in 3 consecutive games, which is the longest such streak in Steelers history. Matches Terry Bradshaw. Only 2 guys for that franchise have ever done it. Now, on the winning side, 12 Monkeys put up 118 points. And we're going to go, this recap here is all going to be about pairs and twos. So Matt Ryan, 2 300-yard games this season. 2 touchdowns or more in every game, and 2 20-plus point games this season. The Texas defense, 2 times they have held a team for under 15 points. They have had 2 4-sack-plus games, and they have had 2 weeks in a row of 19-plus points. The Texas defense looking stout, y'all. the exception of last night, but we'll talk about that next week. Now, Mike Evans, again, 2 games with 5 or more receptions, 2 games this season with 70-plus yards, 2 games with a touchdown, and 2 15-plus point turnouts from Mike Evans. What an amazing year he is having. I'm going to go wrap it up here with DeMarco Murray. 2 5-plus receptions for DeMarco Murray, running back. Amazing, amazing, amazing things for him. He has had 2 touchdowns this season, 1 in every game, and he's got 2 16-plus games so far this season. He's going to have an amazing, amazing turn through this season. Now, we'll have to see what happens this week with 12 Monkeys as we go into week 3, but 12 Monkeys, 2-0. All right, guys, we're going to be heading out to a little veterinarian out here. Got to drop off a little stool sample I collected this morning from Koopa. A little bit of TMI there, but, we got to take care of our dogs the way we got to take care of them. Now, buyer's remorse has only one thing to be remorseful of this season, and that is getting rid of the wide receiver running back position. Good Lord, folks, have you seen this team? Eric Decker. So since Brandon Marshall came to the Jets last season, there's only been 3 weeks that Eric Decker has not scored a touchdown. Only 3 weeks. He had 21 points this week. Just been amazing. Then you got to look at Stephon Diggs and Sam Bradford. Now, these guys were on his bench. Stephon Diggs on the bench. And they combined for 43 points against the Packers. Now, granted, I know they were at home. I know it was the first game in their new stadium. Everybody's a little hyped up. But Stephon Diggs is going to be a player to watch. Mark my words. And not to mention, this team's got stacked with wide receivers. They still have Demaryius Thomas and Odell Beckham Jr., who are just getting started. And we're also going to have to pay close attention to the Panthers defense, because even though they've given up 20-plus points a game, they have forced 6 turnovers. So it's going to be crazy. I'll be real interested to see how he matches up with his different wide receivers week to week. Now, T.Y. Bionic Man learned something from ambitious but rubbish last season. Now, last season, we had D'Angelo Williams got the start in the first 3 weeks of the season, and for some reason, rubbish didn't start it. Now, I get the first week because, D'Angelo Williams. What's he done? I'll tell you what he's done this year. This year, he has had just continued dominance. This past week, 132 all-purpose yards and a touchdown. He put up over 20 points. He's just been crazy good. Now, Antonio Brown fell a little short, but this is how rare that is for Antonio Brown. Only one other time in the last 4 years, in the last 4 seasons, has Antonio Brown not had 40 or more yards in a game. Only one other time. So, this is obviously a fluke for him. So we'll see what happens. And T.I. Bionic Man, I can't believe it. Now, Melvin Gordon can definitely take over for Williams when Williams steps back in week 4. He'll probably take more of that secondary role. But Melvin Gordon's been averaging 18 points a week right now. The only weak spot for T.I. Bionic Man is definitely going to be on the quarterback part of it. You've got Matt Stafford, who is streaky at best. He has his good games, he has his bad games. He had a 16-point swing between week 1 and week 2 this season. And Eli Manning, despite himself, he threw 368 yards. 368 yards, still only scored 10 points. So definitely something that we're going to have to keep an eye on and watch closely. But man, I cannot believe it. We're going to be seeing some really great football, I believe, out of Buyer's Remorse this season. It's going to be absolutely great. So I'm just pulling up to the vet here. So, of course, I got to give my message. Remember, be responsible. Get your cats and dogs spayed or neutered. Have a good day. All right, guys, we're going to see if we can get through a couple more here. Just dropped off that little doo-doo at the veterinary. We're going to be heading down now. I've got a gig tonight, actually. First one in a while. So I'm going to be getting... I got to get looking all fresh. So I'm going to go down and see my boy Dave down by Drake and getting a little cleaned up. But while we do that, let's go ahead and talk about the next matchup here. Big old TDs versus Chicago Guns. Now, big old TDs, 82.7 points, not the best of weeks. But who'd have thunk it? Who'd have thunk it? The Vikings defense has had 2 consecutive weeks now where they have got 2 fumble recoveries and an interception. That's just like Carolina. That's 6, 3 plus 3, there we go, 6 turnovers here in 2 weeks. They scored 22 points this week. Another plus for a big old TD is Tyrod Taylor returned to last season form finally. He had 297 yards and 3 touchdowns for 27.5 points. And amazing that was one of the best Thursday night games I've seen between the Jets and the Bills this last week. Just absolutely awesome. Now San Diego just continues to have some hard luck with injuries. Last week they lost Keenan Allen, but for big old TDs that was amazing. Now even though he had him on his bench, Travis Benjamin is going to look like he's going to step right in there for Keenan Allen and just take off. He had 115 yards, 2 touchdowns for 27 points. Could have been the difference in the game, except big old TDs. Of course, you don't know what he's going to do on the first week. Had him on his bench, something I would have done too. Now, the other thing that's happened for San Diego, and this really hurt big old TDs, but I think with Keenan Allen coming in, he'll be okay. Danny Woodhead out for the season, but at least we know Keenan Allen will be replacing him, but that's going to be a hard one. Now, Chicago Guns didn't have to do a whole lot to get over big old TDs, but they did just barely enough. Quarterback Blake Bortles and Joe Flacco each threw for got 17 points pulled in there. Ezekiel Elliott, 20-plus carries for the second straight week. He's looking good, 13 points this week. I think he's only going to be getting better and better every week as Dak Prescott starts to really figure out that offense there. Julio Jones posted his first 100-plus yard game, so it's really good to see him getting on the right track there, to see what he's going to be up and doing. He had his second touchdown of the season, and he pulled in 19 points. Could be one of the most consistent teams of the year, the Chicago Guns. I think you got Julio Jones, Ezekiel Elliott, Blake, all of those guys, none of them are going to, I don't think, light up the board. Now, Julio Jones we know can. Ezekiel Elliott, I think, will be able to a couple of times. But Blake Bortles, Joe Flacco, those guys are going to be consistent. So I think they're going to have a very consistent game every week this season. So you're going to have to put up over 100 points if you want to have a chance at beating them. All right, that's enough for that one. Chicago Guns with the win, 94.9 points over 82.7 over the big old TDs. Way to go, Chicago Guns. Join my coffee. But we're going to talk about the Civil War that happens every year in my household. That's right. We're talking about the 5th annual Nielsner's Civil War, the match between Nuck Nuck Moose K and the Meaty Clackers. Now, I got to tell you, the Meaty Clackers have had my number every season. I am 1-3 going into this week against them, and of course, this week was no different. And of course, the Meaty Clackers always get up for this one. They actually put up the highest point total this season, 121.2 points, taking out no punt intended. So kudos to them. Now, of course, my befalling, I should say, 80.9 points, all came around because the Houston's defense just got the better of my Kansas City Chiefs. And of course, it didn't get any worse than with Alex Smith. Alex Smith, first player this season to put up negative points, negative 0.8 points for Alex Smith. He had 2 fumbles that he lost, and it was just a deplorable game for my Chiefs. On the flip side, the Meaty Clackers had an amazing game, and it was all started out on Thursday night. So I got a stat for you. Only 3 quarterbacks in the last decade have had 10 completions or more of 15 yards or more in one game. Only 3 quarterbacks. One of them, Ryan Fitzpatrick. If you didn't watch that game on Thursday night, it was an amazing game between the Jets and the Bills. I've talked about it before with Tyrod Taylor. But Ryan Fitzpatrick was absolutely unstoppable that game. 374 yards and a touchdown for 20 points. Now, of course, the other quarterback for the Meaty Clackers we all know is Cam Newton, and he returned to the MVP form that he was last season. 353 yards, 4 touchdowns for 31.7 points. Just 2 monster performances that I think we may see get repeated here throughout the year. The Jets are facing my Chiefs this week, and I got to tell you, I'm a little worried because Marcus Peters has not looked nearly as good as he did last season. The other thing to watch out for with the Meaty Clackers, they're going to be real tough to beat here, especially now that Dak Prescott and Des Bryant are finally seeming to get on the same page. This last week, Des had 13.5 points. So he's going to continue to get better this season. So my hat's off to you, my lady. 121.2 points, highest total so far this season. And now you are 4-1 against Nuk Nuk Muske in the Nielsners Civil War. All right, everybody, big shout out to my man Dave. Got the beard trimmed back, all under control, looking good. Thank you so much. Always makes me feel right. We're going to dive in, though, right now as we get back on the interstate, heading out to Costco. We're going to pick up some groceries now. But I want to talk about that Lock, Stock, and Dock versus Jim Kelly's Little Nippers, our final matchup of the week. This was our closest matchup of the week this week, only separated by about 10 points. Really great matchup between these two. But we gotta first talk about Lock, Stock, and Dock, man. Adrian Peterson did it to you again. Can't believe it. He is going to be out, they say, as soon as 2 weeks, but I highly doubt it. He just had surgery today on his meniscus, had it torn. Now, this is a different knee than the knee that he blew out before, but God, I don't know what's going to happen. Now, the nice part for Lock, Stock, and Dock is sitting on his bench, he has Calvin Benjamin. And Calvin Benjamin just turned it on this week. 108 yards, 2 touchdowns, put up 26 points. Just amazing. The other thing that you got going for you there, Lock, Stock, and Dock, is you got Carson Palmer. And Carson Palmer, I think, is going to have another amazing season. This week he put up 300 yards with 3 touchdowns. Got another 26 points for you there. So I think you're going to be sitting pretty throughout most of the season between those two if you get Calvin Benjamin into the game now. But let's talk about the winning team. Jim Kelly's Little Nippers, 95.5 points. This one was close, but they pulled it out. Great 1-2 punch coming out of Miami for the Little Nip Naps with Ryan Tannehill and Jarvis Landry. They combined for over 39 points this week. And if they can keep this rolling, I mean, Miami's supposed to have a pretty powerful offense running this week, and it's going to come from those two. So huge outputs. Now, we talked a little bit earlier about Chicago Guns. And while I think they're going to have players like Julio Jones, they're going to be very consistent week in and week out with their point totals. Jim Kelly and their Little Nippers are also going to be consistent, but in a different way. I think you're going to see every week a score of about 100 points, which is going to be that benchmark. You got to score 100. If you score more than 100 points, you're going to have a really good shot at beating your team that you're facing. But I think Jim Kelly every week is going to be right at that 100-point threshold. It may not come from the same players every week, week in and week out, but they've got some guys on that team that can really turn it on a given week. And we saw it this week with Ryan Tannehill and Jarvis Landry. So watch out for them. They're going to be that team right along with Shy Guns. It's going to just sort of set that tone at that 100-point level. So good work out of you too. Well, I want to thank you guys for joining me here today. It's been a lot of fun. We talked a lot of football. We got a lot of our errands done. I got my hair did. So I want to thank you guys for joining me today. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. This hopefully will be something new that we can try. Let me know what you think. I'll be adding this in. We'll have our own little album that'll be posted out there. If you guys want to put your own little videos together, talk about how your teams did, if you're disappointed, if you're happy, want to talk about what's coming up, just shoot me a video, add it to the link, email it to me, text it to me, whatever you want to do. We'll get it added in. Also, I would be totally open to doing ride-alongs, so feel free if you want to join me. We can all pile in the car together, do some errands, get some work done, talk a little football, and put it out there for our teams to enjoy. So until next week, we'll see you then.